Welcome to the Infinite Wealth Podcast. I'm Cameron Christensen, along with our co-host Anthony Faso. We just wrapped up our interview with Zeona McIntyre, and she has found tremendous success in the short-term rental market. And Anthony, what were some of your takeaways?
For me, I think what she enlightened me is that if you had a second home, that you could turn it into a short-term rental and potentially create that into a cash-flowing asset. Or what intrigued me more than that is maybe you're on the fence of getting a second home. Now, this might make it a little more financially feasible. If you're able to buy that cabin or that place on the lake and you use it personally, if you can rent it out when you're not using it, ideally, you may be able to make it where it's cash flow neutral. So to me, that was very enlightening. What about you, Cam?
Yeah, she had a bunch of really good information, and honestly, I don't know too much about this space. There's been a lot of conversations about it over the last couple of years, especially here in Vegas. It was a hot topic over the last couple of years, and so I really enjoyed talking to her about it. To be honest, what I really enjoyed was kind of listening to her story. Is she originally started and got into short-term rentals as a side hustle. She was a massage therapist and a friend was doing it, so she thought she'd try it and kind of had instant success and just kind of built it up from there. And if you guys listen, her business model is changing a little bit, and so I find that interesting as far as where she's going to go moving forward. So enjoy this episode. Zeona, welcome.
Thanks.
Absolutely. Let's get started here. Can you tell us how you got started in the kind of short-term vacation rental space?
Yeah, so it was back in 2011. I had a friend who was just recently laid off and living in New York, and he was really wanting to travel the world. He was just totally burnt out. And so he said, hey, I heard this thing, Airbnb. I'm going to try it. I'm going to try to rent out my apartment because I'm stuck in this lease, but I'm ready to go. So he started doing it in, New York. You can charge a lot and it's the big city, so it's where everything starts. But he did really, really well with it. And at the time, I was in massage school and I was really focused on that. And he kept bothering me saying, hey, you got to do this. I'm doing so well. Like, you got to try it. But also I lived in Boulder, Colorado, where I still live. And I wasn't quite sure that like something that's going to work in New York or maybe LA might not work in this little mountain town that I live in, But after a year of him doing it, he told me he made $50,000 off of this apartment that he didn't even own. And I thought, shoot, okay, I'm going to have to do this. So I did get started right away after that and started really small, just with a spare room in the apartment that I was renting, and then kind of built it up from there.
So you started in Boulder.
I did, yeah. And it was slow and steady at first because not a lot of people knew about it in those early days, like 2012. But it's fantastic here now, yeah.
So how did you start marketing your apartment there when you first got started?
Yeah, so I was using Airbnb mostly. So I had a roommate and she moved out. And I basically just said, okay, like, let me just try this Airbnb thing. I already had the room furnished because the whole house was furnished with my stuff. And I just thought, like, if it doesn't work, I'll just get another roommate, no harm, no foul. And so I started with that and it was working out great. And then eventually kind of like moved on to getting other apartments that I was subletting out. I think I lost your question.
No, I was asking how you got started. So how you started marketing it, but
how did I start marketing it?
You were kind of leading into what my next question was so you start with the first apartment, you started marketing the first space that was available, and then you just touched on, hey, you started picking up other apartments. How did you acquire those?
Yeah, so let me just go back one more though. Yeah. What I was using as well. So I started with Airbnb. Then I remember buying some furniture from some lady at a garage sale, and she told me about Vacation Rental by Owner, so VRBO, which is one of the other big platforms. So I started using that one as well. But another little side kind of sneaky thing I was doing at first was I was using couch surfing. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but I'm pretty sure that's kind of where Airbnb got the concept to do it. And couch surfing was really big for a while, where it was this thing where you would just go stay with people for free and you would stay on their couch or sleep on their floor. And maybe if they had a guest room, you'd be so lucky to have a guest room, but it was a free exchange for travelers. And Airbnb was just one step up. So basically I had on my profile there that like, hey, if my house isn't available, I could rent you this place on Airbnb, and got a lot of people through that just because Boulder didn't have a lot of free, cheap places to stay. So
Very cool.
gotta be creative.
Yeah, no, I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
And so then how did you move into other apartments? How'd you scale up from where you began?
Yeah, so I was doing really well with the spare room, and then sometimes, since that room was rented, I decided to rent my room as well, and I would go stay on friends' couches or do massage trade.
Love it.
I was doing the free and getting the paid.
Nice.
Yeah, you gotta hustle, right? I think I was like 26. So I started doing that, and then I thought, man, it would be really cool to rent out another apartment just so I could have like a place to go between, or just to, take it up a notch. And so I asked my dad for $4,000, and that was going to be furniture and, first month's rent and deposit. So man, just like bare bones. But I did that with a little bit of my own money, and I rented a 2-bedroom apartment nearby.
Okay, so Cameron, you mind if I ask a question? Okay.
Please do.
Did you move are you still doing apartments, or did you move into houses, or?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I moved into houses, but apartments were really easy at first because, all the maintenance is covered by the HOA. And so you're not really having to deal with getting trash out on the curb on the right day, because guests are really bad at that. And then snow removal, landscaping, all that kind of stuff. So it was just an easy, natural first step.
Okay, so you started doing this yourself, kind of being self-taught, and now, which I think is super cool, you created a business.
Yeah.
So how did that transition come about?
Well, that was a bit further down the road. So I had been doing Airbnb, so maybe like 2 years or so, and I started to get known around town as the person doing that. So I would do kind of informal consultations for people that were thinking about doing it, and I started getting inquiries from people of like, hey, would you manage my property for me? And so that kind of exploded. As soon as I started offering that, it built up really fast. And from there, I made a website and I started doing podcasts, and now I can manage all over the world. So it just, gets bigger and bigger.
So tell us, what exactly services do you offer?
Yeah, so I do a lot of consulting with people that are wanting to start Airbnb businesses or wanting to, rent out their own home. Sometimes people want to do it themselves. I also, let's see, I'm a real estate agent, so I'm helping people find properties. And so I do a lot of kind of consulting in the financial realm, helping people figure out how to get financially free through real estate. And so I can do that in different states as well. Even though I'm only licensed in Colorado, I can connect them with agents and get them started in different markets. So I'm kind of doing a lot of consulting with people these days. I do still do a little bit of home management, but not as much as I used to.
Now, what does home management mean?
Well, just renting out Airbnbs or renting out long-term rentals. I do a few of them, but not a ton.
Okay. Now, what are some of the, like, a lot of our listeners are mainly focused on single family or residential, or I guess we call it like a long-term rental.
Yeah.
What are some of the advantages of doing a short-term rental?
I'd say the number one advantage is that you can stay in it. So, a lot of people want to go and be in a place for a week or two, or, off screen, we were talking about your dream of having a cabin. You could go to this cabin and not just have it occupied year round by somebody else. So I think that's the number one benefit of it. The other benefit is that if you buy it right, a lot of times you can charge twice as much of what market rate would be with an Airbnb. But you have to be careful because there are a lot of expenses involved. You have to furnish the place, you have to clean the place, you have to supply, toilet paper and paper towels and all those things. Yes. So it can get expensive. And I think a lot of people go like, oh, well, I made $30,000 on my apartment, but they don't talk to you about like how much they spent, So it's a
Right.
little bit different.
It's all about the bottom line.
Sure.
We talk about this a lot with some other investments, and you have to take into account fees and taxes, and how much do you have at the end of the day.
Yeah.
One thing I like is checking out your website is you're pretty transparent with all of your stuff, right? Talking about how much you take home at the end of the day, right? You've got some stuff on your blog. Is that right?
Yeah, I was doing quarterly reports for a while there. I'm not doing them as much anymore just because I'm not managing as many B&Bs as I was. I'm kind of transitioning some of the places that I personally own to long-term rentals. So yeah, it just depends, but I love being transparent. I think that there's a lot of like flash and dazzle with real estate, and that's one of the things that I really don't like about the industry. And I want to tell people like, this is really what you can make. This is really what got me to my financial freedom. And then like, this is where I failed terribly. Like, I think they need to see all of those pieces.
Sure. Yeah, I know. I hate it when you watch. I mean, like one of my biggest gripes, I've said on the podcast a lot, is the show Flip or Flop.
Yeah.
Right. Every show is the same, where they buy this dump, and then something happens, and then Tarek's like, "Oh my gosh, we're going to lose so much money." And then miraculously, something, they end up selling it and they made $80,000. Time for the next flip, which I know is not right. They have to have some lemons and some losses. So I appreciate that you are being transparent.
Yeah.
Now, I'm curious why the transition from short-term to long-term rentals for you?
I still love short term and I'll always love it, but I think there's places for it. So in my personal home, I'll short term all day long. So one of the things I like to do is I use my home as a house hack. And so my boyfriend and I, we've got, this furnished home that we love to be in when we're here and we work from home. But anytime we get an opportunity to do, we're on a pet sitting website. We do a little bit of that. We'll go and stay in someone else's really nice mountain, cabin for free. And then we'll watch their pets and we'll rent out our place on Airbnb. And doing that, especially in the high months of summertime in our area, we can not pay our mortgage for a few months because it's all covered on Airbnb. So, we're trying to do stuff like that where you can house hack something that you would have to normally pay for and get it for free. So I love Airbnb for that. But I also own Airbnbs that are in other states, and they're a little bit harder to manage. And it's fine. It's definitely doable. But I found that when I was getting started, I had to buy that cheaper, older home. And nowadays, I've got a little extra money, and I've learned that what I want is low maintenance. And so I'm selling off 2 of my 100-plus-year-old homes and buying new construction. And I'm going to have a property manager, and it's going to be long-term because I have been my own property manager for, 8+ years. And, over time you get kind of like lazy. I'm lazy.
How much time do you think in the previous 8 years maybe on a monthly basis have you contributed to this business? A few hours a month, 10, 20, what do you think?
Yeah, I'd probably say I was doing part-time. I was doing like 20 hours a week or something like that. And in the height of it, I had, one employee who was doing maybe 10 hours a week. And so it was just like really nice that we could manage it all, and I could automate so much of it that it really didn't require me doing much more than that, So I have had it where it's just really easy and still bringing in a lot of income. But yeah, just trying to learn and grow and change.
Well, to me, even with a single family, the last thing I want to do is take a phone call and somebody's complaining about a toilet or
paper towels.
Yeah, or they don't have napkins in their Airbnb, but I don't want to take those phone calls. Or if somebody says, "Well, I can't pay the rent," they give me some sob story, I'll be like, "Okay, pay me next month or next." I mean, I'm just too. I wouldn't be a good landlord, which. Yeah. Which is great because that created business where there's management companies that their sole focus is to take on that responsibility. Now, Airbnb seems to me to be a lot more high maintenance, a lot more contact with the guest. So if somebody is looking at getting into the short-term rental, what are some solutions to help them with the management piece?
Yeah, I think that even if you have one B&B, all of a sudden you're taking on kind of a part-time job. And I think people need to realize that if they work full time, it may not be for them. If you are, a stay-at-home mom or you have like a part-time job and you have a lot of flexibility, if you're a student, Airbnb could be great. If you're, retired or elderly and like to host people, great for those people. But I think full-time workers, it can happen, but they do need to know that people expect you to respond within an hour. So can you be by your phone all the time? These are some of the cons of it, that there are definitely a lot more touch points with them. Some of the longer term rentals that I manage, I might not hear from a tenant for 3 or 4 months, right? So it is a little bit different. You kind of have this adjustment period every time someone moves into a home. They sometimes need to talk to you. They need to ask you questions. They need to learn the property. And so if that's happening again and again every 3 days, you kind of need to know that availability is needed. Now, if you're wanting to automate it, I wouldn't necessarily suggest it for one B&B, but if you got up to a place where you're managing 3 or 5 and you're really into it, then you can pay for receptionists and you can have, 24/7 support, and they handle the majority of stuff. And then if there's anything that needs to be escalated to you, then you'll get an occasional ping. But I did that for a long time and I thought it was great. There's definitely holes in that system, but it can really help you automate, streamline.
You said you mentioned you manage some properties in other cities. Have you come across any kind of local restrictions, maybe from the government or anything like that? We're in Las Vegas, and Vegas has kind of a negative connotation or views kind of Airbnbs negatively. Has that come up with your experience at all?
Yeah, I mean, there was a period a few years ago where everybody was trying to figure out what their laws were going to be around Airbnb. And so it was kind of like a scary time where we're going like, well, I already own these properties. Are they going to grandfather me in? Are they going to change? Is everything okay? One thing that I've been really loving, especially since COVID, is that I have switched a lot of places to month rentals. And so I'm servicing that for, medical professionals, travel nurses, stuff like that. And they do maybe 3 months or they do 6 months, and they're going to pay a lot more than a long-term person, but maybe not as much as an Airbnb. And that's a real sweet spot because nobody has rules over 30 days. They've kind of forgotten about you. It's like they just assume that if you're doing 30 days, you're doing a year. Well, not really. So the only times I've seen that could be an issue is if you have a specific HOA thing that they say, oh, we want a minimum of 6 months. It's very rare that I've seen that, but it exists in some complexes.
Now, Airbnb currently seems to be the big player in town for short-term rentals.
Mm-hmm.
Thus, they also charge a nice fee. Is there any other alternatives besides Airbnb?
Yeah, so Airbnb charges a 3% fee to the owners, the home provider, and they charge about 14% to the guest. And there are ways that you can take all of that and you pay the 14% so that the guests have a cheaper fee on their end. But I haven't been doing that, and I don't know that I recommend it. All of the other platforms charge a lot because they don't charge the guest. So VRBO, it's I think 12 or 13%. And then if you use something like booking.com, which is really big in Europe, they are like 16%. It's pretty high. Now there's a lot of others. There's probably hundreds to maybe 1,000 different listing sites, but I find that they're just not that big. Literally, I get 90 something percent from Airbnb. I think you could easily just be on Airbnb. And I would say they're the most user friendly and just kind of intuitive. When you get to some of these other sites, they're just like real clunky and you have to kind of navigate this complicated extranet. So I don't always recommend it.
Now, some states now, I believe, are charging a tax on short-term rentals.
It's true. Yeah. So it's city specific. So it might be city and state, and it just kind of depends on where you live. Airbnb is pretty good about it. A lot of places, they collect it for you and they charge the guest, and then they submit it to the city for you on your behalf. So it's not everywhere. But yeah, it is kind of a pain if that's something that you have to keep track of and then send to the city. These are the kinds of things that can really eat into your profit. If you're starting to say, okay, the platform charges 14%, then the city charges 7%, then, I'm paying a property manager 25%. Like, where's your percent?
Yeah.
So you need to be careful in those scenarios, because I think a lot of people just see the shiny amount of what they can charge, but they don't get to keep much of it.
And is that something that you could help somebody go through, kind of the numbers, if someone was interested in getting started?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Awesome. Is there markets that you would maybe recommend, or can you do this pretty much anywhere you want?
You can do it pretty much anywhere. I've seen it even surprisingly work in kind of podunk, out of the way towns. Sometimes it's just like the perfect stop on the highway between this town and that town, and people are driving cross country and they need to stop. So it kind of just depends. But before, it was really like you would do the best in these big urban cities, all the biggest cities in the US. But now it's actually been an opposite thing. Since COVID, a lot of people are wanting more space. They're wanting drive-to destinations. So some of the properties that I see doing the best are a little more out of the way, but bigger. So it's hard to know.
Yeah. And how have you acquired, I think you said you had several, how have you acquired your properties? Was it, hey, I want to look in this area, or did they just kind of opportunities present themselves?
Yeah, I mean, I started first buying my very first property where I live. I think that's how a lot of people get started. It's just like, okay, I know the market, I know how it rents, I know, what's good and bad. So I started here. But after that, the next place I bought was St. Louis. And I bought because I went on a trip there for a friend's wedding. And during the wedding, I was just chatting with people and saying like, oh yeah, I do Airbnb. And they were telling me, oh, cool, we've heard it's really good. We're thinking about trying it. We have some friends who do it and do really well here. And so I kind of thought, okay, that's cool. Like maybe I didn't know that this town would work. And then they started telling me how cheap their mortgages were. And I was just kind of blown away that you could get, a 3-bedroom house with a front and backyard and a garage for like $300 a month. And that just didn't exist in Colorado.
Wait, how much?
Yeah, I mean, they had very cheap houses. It's a little more expensive now, but when I was out there buying homes, I was buying $50,000, $60,000 homes and renting them on Airbnb. So that same house today is doubled. So I've done well with that, but it's surprising.
Is there much, do you put much money into these properties when you buy them? Just curious, is there much renovation?
Like fix up?
Yeah, fix up.
I don't do that. So I think, what I like to tell people is there's like a real estate food chain, right? There's these people that go out, they find that super distressed property. So this house that I'm going to buy 60,000 fixed up, they bought it for 2,000 and then they fixed it up and then they sold it to me. I am so happy to pay them that 60,000 because they did tons of work that I don't want to do. My whole thing is I want to buy that house, close that Friday, move all the furniture in like over that weekend and leave the next week. I'm not trying to stick around and worry about the faucets and fix all these things. I don't have time for that. I need to get guests in there paying me money.
Or putting together a team, right? That's what you always hear is
Oh, yeah.
finding.
Yeah, I mean, then you need a really robust team of people you can trust to manage a FAR. When you're doing just an Airbnb that's renovated, all you need is a cleaner and a handyman. I don't want like a whole team.
Yeah. No, I like that. Be able to fly in on a weekend, get it fixed up, turn around, and get it rented out in a few days.
Yeah. I mean, realistically, it takes like 10, but yes.
See, that's why we got you on here. I was thinking about a day and a half.
Oh, God. I mean, maybe if you bought all new furniture and had it delivered to the house and had somebody like building everything.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'm curious, and I know this would be a range, but if like to furnish a house, is there like a benchmark of so much per room or so much per square feet to fully furnish it?
Yeah, I'd say that if you're doing it with kind of used furniture, so you're going to thrift stores or consignment stores and stuff like that, you're not going to be able to do it for less than like $4,000 for like a 1 or 2 bedroom. You kind of need at least that just to get every little thing. But if you're going to buy new, I would double it. And then I would probably say that per extra bedroom, it's going to be $1,000 on the used side, and then maybe, $1,500 to $2,000 per bedroom on the new furniture side after like a bedroom or 2. So yeah, Furniture can get expensive, but I find that I only really need to go visit these houses every like year and a half. And then maybe I'm just like switching out a couch and getting a couple towels. Like it's not really super expensive. And I personally like to do everything used. So that's how I do it.
Are there any misconceptions out there about the short-term rental market?
Hmm. I don't know. That's kind of a broad question. I'm not sure. I guess like, I mean, I think at first people thought it was dangerous. You had even mentioned that offline where we were kind of talking about your friend who was renting out her place in New York. And you said, gosh, why would I do that as a single woman? I think that's super scary. So I think that
know,
was kind
and
of
actually,
the early days.
when you brought it up, the same thing. Maybe it's just the father in me, but yeah, I was concerned about safety.
Yeah. I'm not concerned about it at all. A lot of times we don't even meet the guests. So maybe that's a misconception that people feel like they have to be there. Generally these days, I think people want to feel like it's theirs and they don't want to be tiptoeing around. So if it's a house that they're renting the entire home, they just show up and enter a code and they're let into the home. So it just kind of feels like that hotel experience.
No, I had shared a little bit. We rented an Airbnb in Laguna last week for my wife's birthday, and it was very easy to get in, just the code, and I was in. But as I told you offline, they didn't have napkins and paper towels, which I was a little. We ended up using like bath towels while we were having dinner. But I had reached out to the owner, and she said, well, basically, we don't have them. But I actually, and I'm going to dive into this in the next, because I'm curious about a short-term rental for myself. So I asked her if she'd have some time to talk to get some feedback from her. And then she even put on there, she goes, well, I can come down in 30 minutes. And this was like those little beach. There was like I guess it was a duplex. There was a room on the top. And then I'm like, are you upstairs? I don't know why it made me feel, not like we were doing anything crazy, but with the owner upstairs, I felt a little more, ooh, we better be. We better be on.
Better not complain about napkins. Yeah.
I know.
Gonna come get you.
Okay, so this is what I was looking forward to most about our call today. And I shared a little bit offline, so I kind of rehash. One of the things that I would like to do is I would like a little getaway somewhere. Maybe it's like within 3 hours that we could go away for a weekend, or even like in times like this. And what we do, we can work from anywhere. So it would be nice. Maybe I just go in the mountains, and all I need is Wi-Fi. And also, as my kids are getting older, I want to try. I'm trying to structure it so my kids are going to want to spend more time with my wife and I. And I'm thinking I would love to have a cabin, but then the accountant in me is like, how much are you really going to use it? We always have these dreams, like when we buy a weight set, right? or a pool table. Man, I'm be playing pool every weekend, and then it's just there to hold dirty clothes. So then I'm thinking, well, why don't I rent it out when I'm not there? And it would be awesome if it was just cash flow neutral.
Yeah.
So, and I know there's a lot that goes into it, but is that possible? Am I thinking, is that possible?
Yeah, I mean, generally, I think that that's pretty possible almost anywhere. I think that that part is not too hard to do, because even I am looking at a place in Maui, and I really want to have like a free Hawaii place that I can go to 2 months a year and then just have it kind of like pay for itself. I think that's pretty easy. And generally, the way that I'm looking at that is like when you buy a home, a lot of times the mortgage is pretty close to rental rates. Sometimes it's less, sometimes it's more, but it's not too far away. Now, if you're looking at renting on Airbnb, often you're renting, 1.5 times to 2 times the rent. And so if you're in that market where you can get that margin, if you're going to just try to be even, as long as your expenses are not going over that second, half of that rent, then you're okay. And so I think it's pretty easy to do. But if you're trying to say, am I going to make enough money to retire just owning this one Airbnb? Well, maybe not, probably not. Then you'd have to really buy a great deal and the right place, and everything has to be perfect. But if you're really just trying to have like a vacation rental for free, that's pretty easy to do.
Okay, cool. All right. Now, and I know it depends on the market, so I apologize for kind of putting you on the spot, but if you can give me a range, it's fine. When we're running the numbers, is there a certain percentage of vacancy that would be appropriate?
So there's a really great tool. There's a website called AirDNA.co. And they have a Rentalizer tool that's free, and you can go ahead and pay for like a whole really robust thing of numbers if you want. But I just go to that free tool, and it gives you 3 numbers. It tells you what it thinks you're going to make a year, what your occupancy will be like on average for the year, and then what you would on average be able to charge per night. And so that gives you, it's general, because you're not able to see like, what are the seasons and how does it change? But with kind of that bird's eye view, can you make enough based on, what you're seeing that you're going to have to be paying in a mortgage? So that I find is a really helpful thing, just to have a guideline, because then you can go, oh, this is actually a place where, occupancy is over 70%. That's really great. Or you see, wow, it's a place where occupancy is only 40%, but in that 40%, I can charge $700 a night. Oh, this might still work. So you just kind of need to know that, but it'll help you run your numbers then. So
awesome.
I recommend it.
No, that's a great website. We'll be sure to add that in the show notes. I was going to ask you a question. You mentioned before that you got started with, I think, a $4,000 loan from maybe dad.
Yeah.
Yeah. How is your
I paid it back.
That a girl with interest, I hope?
No.
We need to talk to your dad.
Yeah, we do. How has your financing changed? Has it changed over the years? You paid him back. You're using your own money now, or are you using other people's money? How have you handled financing piece over the years?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think buying, you can do all kinds of financing, right? So I did some creative stuff because I was young and I was working for myself. And especially back in the day, people did not recognize Airbnb income as income. And so that was really hard for getting a loan. So the very first place that I bought here just in Boulder, I went to a friend of mine who was a landlord of like 17 apartments. And he had been a landlord of mine, a few apartments back. And we had stayed in touch, and he was writing private loans for people, and I kind of knew about it. So I went and asked him for a loan, and that worked out for me, and I got my loan that way. After that, I had a little bit of money I saved. So these houses in St. Louis, they were a lot cheaper. And so I bought one of them in cash, and I bought another one with a friend, and he had the cash. So I just kind of like used his cash and paid him back over time. So that was kind of a way that I did those. Then after that, as I keep buying houses, I have to keep figuring out how I'm going to do this. So the next ones, I brought in a partner who had just a W-2 job and could get an easy mortgage. Yeah. And so he was kind of a silent partner. He didn't have to do much. I had him, build some furniture, but after that, he was just collecting the money over time. But yeah, just kind of finding ways, how can I get to this goal that I want to get when there's like a few obstacles? So at this point now, I can qualify for a mortgage, but before I had to figure it out.
What is your goal? You mentioned kind of trying to hit a goal, and what are you trying to achieve? Looks like you got a pretty good portfolio. You're transition into kind of some long-term rentals, but what's the end all here for you?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think it's like really changing for me these days. So I'm not exactly sure. I think for a while I was just trying to say like, okay, my expenses are pretty low. What if I could just do $4,000 in cash flow and not have to do any work? Like if I got to this place of just like zeroed out, then I know that I'm always making more than I'd ever spend. Mm-hmm. But I think now I'm kind of like moving into doing real estate, selling real estate. I kind of have this like, I want to be a cunty realtor, I want to have that like fancy car and do just like more flashy things. So I'm like, okay, well then maybe that needs to look a little bit bigger. So I'm probably working towards maybe $10,000 of passive income a month that I just like wouldn't have to do anything for. So that's kind of me transitioning out of some of the older homes that I own and trying to move that over into new construction and then kind of building that up. But I think for me, as I evolve as an investor, I'm looking for passive. I'm looking for syndications. I'm looking for places to put money where I'm not doing as much. And yeah, I've definitely thought about self-storage units. I want to learn more about it because those seem super easy, but it's a whole new animal that I don't know about.
Mhm.
Thanks for sharing. I was curious because when we talk to people about kind of financial independence and where they want to go, there's always that number,
Yeah,
right?
interesting.
Right. There's always a number.
Yeah.
10,000 is the one that you threw out. I was talking to a guy before, 7,500, right? But it's for us, is I always want somebody to think a little bit bigger. Right? Is don't ever put a ceiling on where you want to go. Is what's the next step? Once you get there, you're never going to settle, right? You're an entrepreneur. So you're not going to hit 10 grand and then just sit back and do nothing, right? There's something that you're going to build. And so that's what's always interesting to me. So thank you.
Yeah, I think for me, I was really interested in financial independence. That was like the thing that got me on the road of doing Airbnb. And I was able to get to that place of making more pretty passively than I was spending in 2 years. So Airbnb really was a catalyst to something that can take people 10 or 15 years. So I've done that a long time ago. And that's when I had very strict, like, these are my goals and these are my numbers and this is what I need to see. After you do that, it's kind of like, okay, well, how much do I actually need? Where's that enough feeling?
Yeah.
And that can be a little blurry. So that's kind of where I don't really know.
Yeah.
You mentioned you started doing this when you're about 26. I'm always curious how, growing up, we are taught, go to school, go to college, get a good job at a good company. But you went and took a different route.
Yeah,
And
I did
always
none of
like
that.
to hear people's story. How did you create your own path as opposed to following what everybody else is doing?
Yeah, my dad's a real entrepreneur, and I kind of always had that in my genes. I like, even when I was younger, I was like selling candy to kids and like trying to make a profit and like seeing how that would all work, buy the big bag from Costco and then see how you can like peddle it at school. So I've always been that way. And I think for me, it was just a matter of time trying to find what would be my thing. And at the time that I found Airbnb, I was going to go do massage and I was excited about that. And then having a few people under me that were like working in my behalf and, building something that way. And Airbnb kind of surprised me. I thought it was just going to be a side hustle for, a few minutes as I was moving on to the next thing. And it turned out to take over my whole life. And then I was doing that exclusively. So you never quite know, but I think if you're just sort of like working in that direction of like, hey, I'm going to do this myself, I'm going to keep trying to do my own thing, and not really settling, then you're going to find, you're going to settle somewhere and realize like, wow, okay, this is going to work out for me. So I found that real estate is just like a really comfy home. And being an entrepreneur is not always the easiest thing in the world, but I'm really grateful for it.
Awesome. I like to get back talking about my dream of owning a cabin. And but Cameron, this could also help you achieve your dream.
Oh boy, here we go.
Yeah, what's that?
One of his dreams is to go to every Paul Mitchell hair design studio. And so if this works out, you could buy an Airbnb at each one of these. And then as you're going on the tour, you could stay for free. But okay, so back to me. Okay. So if somebody's looking to have that personal / vacation rental, like, what do they do? Where do they start? Are there resources, or what do I do next?
Yeah, well, I mean, you were saying I want something that I can drive to, So you kind of look like, hey, this is where I live. What does drive to mean for me? Like, am I going to drive X amount of hours? And then you kind of look like, what are attractive areas near there? And what are things that are important to me? But then also when you're looking at like, okay, this would be a really cool town. When you buy it, if there's a college, if there's a hospital, buy it near that, because you want to know how you're getting your tenants when you're not there. So one thing that I find is that colleges bring lots of parents, students, teachers, events. So colleges are great. Hospitals bring traveling nurses, doctors, and patients. So those are great. So you kind of want to have like a reason that someone is going to be renting out your B&B if you're going to try to like have it for free. So that's kind of what I would say. But yeah, you're going to have to pick a town. I can't do it all for you.
Well, but are there resources? Okay, so I have my town, but like there's got to be.
Yeah, I'd say like that AirDNA site will help you understand, because if you're saying, okay, I just want to be in the state of Utah or Southern Utah or something like that, then you kind of look like, okay, what couple of towns are there that are bigger than maybe, I don't know if I would be in a town that only has like 15,000 people, you know, like try to get something that's going to be a sizable town. So maybe you're looking at something closer to 100,000 people. And then try to see, okay, in these towns, let me look on AirDNA, what is it saying for this town? And you might say, wow, this town's 70%, this town's 50% vacant, you know, so why? Then you can dig in a little bit more, but I think it's a good general kind of overview.
Awesome. I got one last question here before we wrap it up. You'd mentioned, was it worldwide that you have? Do you have properties outside the U.S.?
Yeah, I manage a place in Spain. I have managed in Greece and South Africa. Like, I mean, you can do it anywhere. The time difference makes it hard. But the people that I manage for in Utah, I was telling you guys offline that I have a house in Utah that I manage. They live in Australia. And so when we were trying to communicate on WhatsApp, it's a little bit complex, but you know, we make it work. So yeah, it can be done anywhere. Once you have your systems down and you've got, you know, really good cleaner and a good handyman, it's the same as if it was down the street.
Awesome, Zeona. Thank you very much. Where can people find you?
ZeonaMcIntyre.com. It's just my name. Awesome.
We'll make sure we share that in the notes. Thank you again. Appreciate your information today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Oh, there's more.
No, I was just
back to Anthony.
You sounded like that was a bad thing.
No.
I was just going to say, make it a fantastic day. That's all.
Why don't I believe you?
Well, if you listen to the podcast, that's how I end it. Every episode, make it a fantastic day.
All right. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Absolutely. Take care.